Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 16th of September. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with a thwarting of an attempted stabbing of a soldier this afternoon by a Palestinian assailant near the Tapuach Junction in Samaria. The 20-year-old Palestinian resident of Nablus arrived at the checkpoint with a bag that aroused the suspicions of border police officers patrolling the area. After being called for a security check, he then pulled out a knife and attempted to stab the forces. One of the soldiers quickly drew his gun, causing the assailant to drop the weapon and attempt to flee the scene. He was immediately apprehended by the troops and, during subsequent questioning, confessed to carrying out the attack. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today renewed his commitment to combating terrorism and declared war on assailants across the country who throw stones and firebombs. As part of the battle, the government intends to introduce new legislation mandating harsher penalties against those convicted of such offenses. We get more in this report from IBA's Ari O'Sullivan.
The Prime Minister wanted a first-hand look. He visited the site where 64-year-old Alexander Levlovich lost control of his vehicle and crashed after it was pelted with stones as he was returning from a Rosh Hashanah festive meal. 2 other passengers in the car were also injured in the incident, which occurred on Asher Weiner Boulevard as it passed the Arab neighborhood of Tzur Bachar. The Prime Minister then was briefed by security officials along the volatile Highway 443, the scene of repeated attacks. Last night, Netanyahu called an emergency meeting of his top cabinet members in light of the escalation of clashes in and around Jerusalem and decided to use all means necessary to combat stone throwers and the use of firebombs against police and civilians. We will set a new standard of defense and prevention, the statement from Prime Minister said. As this took place, residents of the Armona Natziv neighborhood held a loud protest against the Palestinian stone throwers, shouting death to the Arabs. They cheered when border police arrested a Palestinian youth suspected of stoning Israeli vehicles. Today, the unease continues in the neighborhood. With its center of banks and health clinics and driving schools, the place is a magnet for Arabs from nearby Tzur Bachar, where the stonings took place.
My friend got 18 Molotov cocktails on his house. So far, only by the good luck, he didn't get it into his house.
But you know, we see a lot of Arabs from Tzur Bachar coming here to the center, so you have some kind of coexistence.
Yes, but it's getting more and more fragile. I'm not afraid. I'm not the type to be afraid. If I'm going to be afraid to live here, I mean, what is a Jew like my uncle and Amsam should say when you're flooded with radical Muslims around there?
This longtime resident confided that he was scared living in the neighborhood, but had nowhere else to go. I'm here in the seam line between the Arab neighborhood of Tzur Bachar behind me, which is shut by the border police, and the Jewish neighborhood of Armona Natziv. It was here that the accident took place a few days ago that has everybody in Armona Natziv in a bad state of mind. They're telling me that they are fearful now because they've seen a number of increased attacks against the neighborhoods. Yet the people of Tzur Bachar tell me that it was an innocent accident. The man had a heart attack and he crashed. Yet it's a microcosm of what's happening now in Jerusalem in the neighborhoods that have a seam between the Jewish and the Arab residents. Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
The victim of the Sunday night rock attack, Alexander Levlovich, will be laid to rest at the Givat Shaul Cemetery in the capital a short time from now at 6 p.m. Relative calm returned to Jerusalem's Old City today, which was the location of 3 days of violence over the Rosh Hashanah holiday. The security presence near the entrance of the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound remained heavy today, although police appeared to be cautious by avoiding coming too close as to not further inflame the situation. They were forced to enter the compound every day at the start of the week to disperse rioters who barricaded themselves within the mosque and pelted them with firebombs, rocks, and concrete blocks. A visit of 15 religious Jewish visitors to the area went ahead as planned early this morning under police escort, as well as by the Waqf Muslim authorities who administer the compound. Here's the reaction from President Reuven Rivlin to the upsurge of violence in the capital.
What is going on the Holy Mountain on the last few days, and it comes, it goes, is it's a matter of fact, a action of people who are trying to provoke and to create really hatred between people, between believers, between people who believe in God and worship Him. Unfortunately, the provocations are taking place from time to time, And we have to deal with that, because as long as we are the people who are to be responsible for law and order, we have to do everything in order to avoid people from the Islamic movement to create those provocations, and we are trying our best in order to separate between the people. We have no war with Islam, as I've said, no fight with Christianity, of course. We all have to battle together against extremism and fundamentalism.
As Israel's response to the Palestinian violence in Jerusalem sparks condemnation across the Arab world, officials in Washington continue to urge calm out of concern that the tensions could spiral out of control.
The United States remains deeply concerned by the recent violence and escalating tensions surrounding Hamar al-Sharif, or the Temple Mount, as it's also known. The United States, as we routinely do, strongly condemn all acts of violence, particularly in that location that's so sacred to many, many people. It is absolutely critical that all sides exercise restraint, refrain from provocative actions and rhetoric, and preserve unchanged the historic status quo on the Haram al-Sharif Temple Mount, both in word and in practice.
The United Nations Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process is also urging sides to return to the status quo, while warning that violent confrontation in Jerusalem can ignite the entire region.
The Middle East faces a vicious tide of terror and extremism. Such serious provocations have the potential to ignite violence well beyond the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. All sides have a responsibility to refrain from provocative actions and rhetoric. It is imperative that the historic status quo is preserved in line with agreements between Israel and His Majesty the King of Jordan as custodian of the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem.
We want the international community to send a loud and clear message that this aggression against our holy sites in Jerusalem cannot be tolerated, to be condemned, and to be stopped immediately.
Boosting forces and increasing punishment for rioters will not improve security as much as building local Arab leadership that can rein in the stone throwers. This, according to Arab affairs expert Professor Menachem Klein of the Bar-Ilan University, while speaking with IBA's Aryeh O'Sullivan.
Now, last night there was a meeting with the Prime Minister talking about steps to take against stone throws, against the violence, want to increase forces. Is there anything that can be done, really, to stop this violence?
Only political arrangements and talking with the local leadership in Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, the problem that Israel faces since 2000 is that there is no local Palestinian leader, a person that his word is respected by his own people. Since the death of Faisal Husseini and the closing down the Orient House, there is no local leadership. So that's the problem. So once the PLO leadership was broken into pieces, now Israel has to confront every piece, every stone of the mountain. There are so many stones in the mountain that Israel faces a problem how to deal with. So what is needed, let's say basically, is to have a local, to let the Palestinians establish local leadership and then come to terms with the local leadership. Because Ramallah, Abbas, is far away and he has no say in Jerusalem. Hardly has say in Ramallah and the West Bank, but he has definitely no say in Jerusalem.
Wouldn't that undermine Israel's sovereignty in the city?
That's the Israeli argument. But on the other hand, then we have the Palestinian, let's say, mini uprising, okay, the mini intifada, which is individual intifada, which are hardly organized and so on. This also undermined the Israeli sovereignty. So in any case, the Israeli sovereignty is unacceptable and undermined. So Israel has to choose between the, let's say, the worse and the bad.
What about the other method of sending in more troops and making more punishment for throwing stones? Is that going to work?
It never works. It never works. It did not work when the Brits were here in Palestine before '48. It did not work along the first Intifada, for instance. Yitzhak Rabin said, we have to break the bones, and it did not work. And it does not work since a year ago in the war in Gaza and the mini Intifada here. In Jerusalem, it does not work. Force can low down temporarily the uprising, but only a political solution is a solution that is accepted by the majority, not everybody, but the majority.
Palestinian security prisoner Mohammed Alan was rearrested today after being discharged from the Barzilai Medical Center in Ashkelon, where he's been receiving treatment, and was returned to the custody of the Israel Prison Service. The 31-year-old suspected Islamic Jihad terrorist was released from administrative detention last month after having refused food for over 60 days in protest of being held without the formal filing of criminal charges against him. At the time, the High Court ordered that he be released due to his deteriorating medical condition that included the evaluation that Alan may have suffered brain damage as a result of his hunger strike. The entire case has sparked fresh calls for the government to curb the practice of administrative detention, under which prisoners can be held indefinitely without trial for extended periods of 6 months. The defense establishment has long insisted that the incarceration is necessary in dealing with terrorists when sensitive evidence against them cannot be revealed in open court.
Administrative detention of a sick person, Mohammed Alan, again in the hospital after this prolonged time of arrest in the jail and then in the hospital after hunger strike, is unbelievable. It seems to be that somebody is taking a decision because either he is crazy or he is pushing all of us to confrontation, to blare up the area. I cannot find any other explanation.
In other news, President Rivlin today hosted the Council of European Bishops at his official residence in Jerusalem. The delegation of 40 clergymen were led by Cardinal Peter Erdo of Budapest and are in the country to hold their annual assembly at the invitation of Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Fuad Twal. The conference customarily convenes in one of the member states, but the delegation said that they came on a special mission to the Holy Land in a show of unity with the Christians in the Middle East and to focus attention on an area which is overshadowed by regional problems. The bishops described their mission as having the joint goals of restoring evangelical Christianity to Europe while demonstrating support of the Christian community in the Middle East, particularly in the Holy Land. Well, among the deepest cause for concern among local Christians is the future of the community school system, which is currently in peril. Hundreds of activists protested outside the government complex in Haifa today, where they reiterated their call for the Ministry of Education to allocate greater funding for Christian academic institutions. Over the past 6 years, the amount received by the nation's 47 Christian schools has been incrementally reduced. All schools in the sector have remained closed nationwide since the start of the school year on September 1st, and an estimated 33,000 Arab Israeli students have remained at home in protest of those cuts. A nonprofit organization working to promote coexistence and equality among the country's Jewish and Arab Palestinian citizens, called the Abraham Fund Initiatives, today called on the government to immediately step in and resolve the issue. That demand is also being supported by a group of 130 lecturers and teachers who signed a petition echoing that plea. In criminal news, there was what appears to be a double murder in the Upper Galilee this morning when a father and son were shot to death while sitting in their car outside the northern village of Deir al-Assad. 50-year-old Salah Hassarma was immediately killed, and his 25-year-old son, Luai, died en route to the hospital. According to an initial police investigation, the drive-by shooting occurred amid an ongoing dispute between local families, which has already claimed the lives of 4 other relatives. A manhunt is currently underway for the assailants. as Moscow comes under increasing international pressure to explain the expansion of its role in Syria. It was announced today that Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin next week. According to officials, the premier will detail the threats posed to Israel by the increased flow of advanced weaponry to not only the Arab Republic, but also via the transfer of the military hardware to Hezbollah and other terror groups in the region. The West has been sounding the alarm over the bolstered Russian military support of the Assad regime in what is feared to be a prelude of taking perhaps a direct combat role in propping up the embattled government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. For his part, Syrian President Assad granted an interview to Russian media in which he displayed his traditional brand of defiance. Despite the 4.5-year civil war and a significant loss of territory suffered by his regime, Assad insisted that a political solution will only be possible following the defeat of those that he called the terrorists, and said that he will not step down under pressure from the West. After acknowledging the deep economic, political, and military support that his nation receives from Iran, he went on to slam efforts by the U.S.-led coalition against the Islamic State, saying that the Americans are blind to the reality that his forces are the only power fighting ISIS on the ground. The Syrian leader also said that the wave of refugees from his nation currently flooding Europe is a direct result of the West supporting those terrorists while ignoring the victims of bloodshed inside the Arab Republic. Let's listen.
So as long as they follow this propaganda, they will have more refugees. So it's not about Europe didn't accept them or inbred them as refugees. It's about not dealing with the cause. Stop, if you are worried about them, stop supporting terrorists. That's what we think regarding the crisis. This is the core of the whole issue of refugees.
And refugees from Syria are among the 150 people arrested in Hungary so far, as the tough new laws guarding its southern frontier with Serbia take effect. Now that the main passage to the European Union's passport-free Schengen zone have been severed, hundreds of migrants spent the night sleeping along the highway, and tent cities are popping up along the 175-meter-long razor wire fence designed to keep them from crossing. The main highway between Serbia and Budapest has been closed, with no announced date for its reopening. Hungary is facing widespread criticism for the measures, which it says it was forced to implement after 190,000 migrants were recorded entering its territory so far this year. For the second time in a week, Democrats in the U.S. Senate blocked legislation aimed at killing the Iranian nuclear deal. In a vote of 56 to 42, similar to last week's procedural vote, the Republican majority still fell short of the 60 needed in the 100-member chamber to advance a resolution against the July 14th pact. Here's a part of the debate between the two sides ahead of the vote.
But just last week, 42 senators blocked the ability of the Senate to end debate and actually vote on the substance of the deal. So I hope that changes. I hope tonight at least 2 senators on the other side of the aisle will give us the ability to express ourselves on the substance of the deal and not block a bipartisan majority who wants to express themselves through a vote of disapproval. I yield the floor and thank you for the time.
To say that we haven't taken the time, dealt with this in a bipartisan way, dealt with it in a serious way, allowed open debate, we have done it. And we've cooperated in doing it. You don't like the result? I happen to believe it's a result that really reflects where we should be as a nation. I support the president. I believe that we ought to have 2 goals here: stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, stop America from going to another war in the Middle East. That's what I want to achieve. And I think we can achieve it through this agreement.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has now moved to arrange a third procedural vote on the nuclear deal, possibly as soon as this week, on an amendment preventing U.S. President Barack Obama from lifting economic sanctions against Tehran until the Ayatollahs formally recognize Israel's right to exist and release American citizens currently being detained in the Islamic Republic. It remains unclear how the Democrats might line up on such a proposal. Returning home and in financial news, the shekel today put in a mixed performance in foreign currency trading, as did share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Here's a look at the afternoon numbers. Turning now to our very unpredictable weather patterns and taking a look at the torrential rains and hailstorm that pelted the center and the south of the country last night, forcing the closure of Road 40 leading to Eilat, as well as surrounding highways. The surprise downpour also caused flight delays to the Red Sea resort city, with the airport authority banning all takeoffs and landings for several hours. And as for the forecast, it looks like tomorrow will be another unseasonably hot and muggy day with no significant change in temperatures, but you might want to keep your umbrellas handy just in case. Here's the forecast at home and abroad. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow when Laura Cornfield will be at this desk. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great evening and shalom from Jerusalem.